My beloved child, pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear carries a truth your heart may have been quietly preparing to understand. You could have kept scrolling. You could have passed these words without giving them another thought. Yet something inside you asked you to stay, and perhaps there is a reason this message feels different. In this fictional spiritual story, imagine heaven drawing back a curtain and allowing you to see what has been unfolding behind the silence. Your soulmate is standing at the edge of a future they once feared imagining. They have thought about what it would mean to wake beside you, to build something lasting with you, to stop living between uncertainty and longing. They are closer than ever to admitting what their heart truly wants. But before that future can begin, there is one important thing that must come first. And it is not what you think. You may imagine that the missing piece is a confession, an apology, a promise, or some dramatic gesture that proves their devotion. But the deeper truth is quieter than that. Your soulmate has already been wrestling with feelings they cannot easily explain. There have been moments when they tried to convince themselves that what they felt for you would fade if they simply waited long enough. They distracted themselves. They became busy. They told themselves that timing mattered more than emotion and that practicality should speak louder than the strange pull of the heart. Yet whenever the noise became quiet, something returned. Your memory returned. The possibility of you returned. And with it came a question they could no longer silence. What if the future they have been searching for has been pointing toward you all along? But even that realization is only the beginning, because recognizing love and being ready to protect it are two very different things. There is something your soulmate has begun to understand about you that has changed the way they imagine tomorrow. They once believed that being with you would simply mean choosing a person they loved. Now they realize it would mean choosing a completely different way of living. It would require honesty where they once hid behind silence. It would require courage where they once waited for certainty. It would require them to stop allowing old fears, old disappointments, and other people's expectations to make decisions for them. This realization has shaken them more deeply than they expected. They can picture the future with you now, but the picture has forced them to look directly at the parts of themselves they have been avoiding. That is why the delay you have felt may not have been emptiness. In this story, the silence has been filled with an internal battle you could not see. And something happened during that battle that they were not prepared for. There was a moment, ordinary from the outside, when they suddenly imagined losing the possibility of you completely. Not temporarily. Not as another pause. They imagined you genuinely moving forward without them, becoming peaceful without their presence, finding happiness that no longer depended on whether they finally found the courage to speak. That thought did something to them. For the first time, they understood that love cannot remain permanently suspended between intention and action. A heart cannot be asked to wait forever while another heart decides whether it is brave enough to arrive. And suddenly the future they had always assumed would remain available began to feel fragile. This is where the story becomes more personal. Your soulmate has been asking themselves questions they avoided before. If you stood before them today and asked, "What exactly are you willing to build with me?" would they have an answer? If you asked whether they were prepared to protect your peace instead of merely enjoying your affection, could they honestly say yes? If you asked whether they were ready to communicate when things became uncomfortable rather than disappearing behind pride, confusion, or fear, what would they say? These questions have become impossible for them to ignore because they know something about you now. You are no longer meant to accept half-hearted love simply because the feelings underneath it are real. Feelings can be genuine and still be insufficient. A future needs something stronger. And that is why one important thing must come first. But do not rush ahead, because the meaning of that condition is deeper than a single word. Heaven, within this cinematic story, is not revealing an obstacle designed to separate you. It is revealing the foundation required to keep two people from repeating the very patterns that hurt them before. Your soulmate may be ready to imagine forever, but imagination alone cannot carry a relationship through difficult seasons. Chemistry cannot do it. Longing cannot do it. Even love, when separated from maturity, can become a beautiful feeling trapped inside painful patterns. The thing that must come first is connected to the moment when love stops asking, "How strongly do I feel?" and begins asking, "How safely can I show up?" Your soulmate has been learning this distinction in ways they did not expect. They have replayed moments between you, including moments you may have assumed they forgot. A conversation that ended too quickly. A look that communicated more than words. A time when you needed reassurance but received distance instead. A moment when they wanted to tell you something meaningful but allowed hesitation to close their mouth. These memories have not disappeared. They have gathered inside them like pieces of a puzzle, and recently those pieces have started forming a picture. They are beginning to see that the greatest danger was never the absence of feeling. The danger was allowing powerful feelings to remain hidden behind inconsistent actions. Something inside them is changing because of this. They are beginning to understand that if they want a future with you, they cannot ask you to interpret silence as devotion. They cannot expect you to translate mixed signals into certainty. They cannot repeatedly withdraw and then hope your heart will somehow know what they meant. Love that intends to last must eventually become visible through behavior. It must become dependable. It must become honest enough to survive uncomfortable conversations. And perhaps this is the lesson they resisted longest, because consistency requires vulnerability, and vulnerability has always frightened a part of them. There is a reason for that fear. Somewhere in their emotional history, they learned that showing too much could cost them something. Perhaps they watched love become unstable around them. Perhaps someone taught them, intentionally or unintentionally, that affection could disappear without warning. Perhaps they once trusted someone who handled that trust carelessly. Whatever the symbolic history of this fictional soulmate may be, one truth remains: they developed ways of protecting themselves long before they ever imagined meeting someone like you. Those protections once helped them survive disappointment. Now those same protections threaten to keep them from experiencing the connection they actually desire. That contradiction has brought them to a crossroads. They cannot build the future they want while carrying every defense mechanism from the past into it. They know this now. And knowing it has created an unusual kind of urgency, not panic, not fear, but clarity. They are realizing that before they can ask you to believe in forever, they must become someone whose presence makes forever feel emotionally possible. They must stop treating commitment like a feeling that appears only when circumstances are easy. They must begin seeing commitment as a choice repeatedly expressed through honesty, patience, responsibility, and courage. Yet there is another layer, and this is the part they have barely admitted even to themselves. Your soulmate is not only afraid that they might lose you. They are afraid that when they finally come forward, you may no longer believe them. Think about that for a moment. They have imagined saying everything they kept hidden. They have imagined telling you how often you crossed their mind. They have imagined explaining why certain moments unfolded the way they did. They have imagined confessing that some of their distance came not from lack of feeling but from the intensity of it. But then another thought enters: what if words arrive too late? What if you hear them but cannot trust them? What if the heart they want to return to has learned to survive without waiting? This possibility has forced them to reconsider what they believed a grand romantic moment would accomplish. Once, they may have thought the right words could fix everything. Now they are beginning to understand that trust is rarely restored by one extraordinary speech. It is rebuilt through ordinary moments handled differently. Showing up when you said you would. Speaking when silence would be easier. Listening without becoming defensive. Making space for another person's fears without turning those fears into an argument. Choosing clarity when ambiguity offers an escape. These are not cinematic gestures, yet they are the invisible architecture of lasting love. And strangely, this realization is making their feelings for you stronger rather than weaker. Because they no longer want only the exciting beginning. They are imagining the middle. They are imagining ordinary mornings, difficult weeks, celebrations, disagreements, unexpected changes, tired evenings, quiet drives, laughter that arrives at ridiculous moments, and conversations that require both people to soften their pride. They are imagining the reality of sharing a life instead of merely dreaming about the romance of it. And somewhere in that vision, they saw something that moved them deeply: you were not asking them to be perfect. You were asking them to be present. That realization may be the closest we have come to the important thing, but we have not reached its deepest meaning yet. Your soulmate knows that presence cannot exist where unresolved fear controls every decision. They have begun noticing how often fear disguised itself as logic. Maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe I should wait until everything is perfect. Maybe they already know how I feel. Maybe saying nothing is safer. Each sentence sounded reasonable until they examined what lived underneath it. Beneath the logic was vulnerability. Beneath vulnerability was fear. And beneath fear was something astonishing: they cared far more than they wanted anyone to know. For a long time, hiding that truth gave them a sense of control. If they did not reveal how deeply they cared, rejection could not reach the deepest part of them. If they remained uncertain, they would never have to risk certainty being taken away. If they kept one foot outside the emotional doorway, they could always retreat. But love has slowly exposed the cost of that strategy. Protection from heartbreak can become protection from intimacy. Avoiding rejection can become avoiding connection. And keeping an escape route open can prevent someone from ever fully arriving. So now your soulmate is facing themselves. Imagine them sitting alone when the world has finally become quiet. No performance. No distractions. No opinions from anyone else. Only the truth they have postponed. In that silence, they ask themselves, if I truly want this person in my future, why am I still behaving as though I need protection from them? The question lingers. They cannot dismiss it. And then another follows. What if the thing standing between us isn't circumstance anymore? What if it is the part of me that refuses to trust what I already know? That second question changes everything. Because suddenly they begin seeing your connection differently. They remember your patience, but they also remember the moments when your patience became exhaustion. They remember your warmth, but they also remember times when you became quieter because you did not know where you stood. They remember how naturally you offered understanding, and they realize that understanding should never have been mistaken for unlimited tolerance. Something inside them becomes painfully clear. Loving someone means caring about what your uncertainty does to their heart. This does not fill them with shame. It fills them with responsibility. And responsibility is powerful because it moves a person from wishing toward choosing. Your soulmate begins asking what they would need to change if they genuinely wanted to create a future worthy of both of you. They think about communication. They think about emotional honesty. They think about the boundaries that would need to exist around outside influences. They think about old relationships, old expectations, and old voices that may still be occupying space inside decisions that should belong to the present. They think about whether they have truly released what needs releasing. And this is where another hidden revelation appears, because the important thing that comes first may require them to close a door they have been leaving slightly open. Not necessarily a door to another person. Sometimes the most difficult door to close leads back to an older version of ourselves. The version that runs when feelings become serious. The version that assumes abandonment before it happens. The version that tests people instead of trusting them. The version that expects someone else to prove love endlessly while offering only fragments in return. The version that mistakes emotional distance for strength. Your soulmate has begun recognizing that this older self cannot lead them into the future they imagine with you. Something has to be released before something new can be built. And perhaps you have your own version of that doorway. This message is not asking you to chase them, convince them, or rescue them from their uncertainty. Quite the opposite. The deeper spiritual symbolism here is about two people becoming capable of meeting each other without abandoning themselves. You are not being asked to lower your standards to make love easier. You are being invited to understand that genuine connection does not demand that one person carry all the emotional weight. Your soulmate's readiness must become their responsibility. Your responsibility is to remain connected to your own truth. That is important because you may have spent too much time wondering what you needed to do to make the future happen. Maybe you believed you needed to say the perfect thing. Maybe you thought being more patient would solve everything. Maybe you wondered whether becoming quieter, easier, less emotional, less demanding, or more available would finally make them certain. But love that requires you to disappear in order to keep someone comfortable cannot become the peaceful future your heart desires. The person who truly wants to build with you must eventually meet the real you, not the version of you shaped entirely around their fears. And your soulmate is beginning to understand this too. They do not want your exhausted patience anymore. They want your genuine trust. But they know trust cannot be demanded. It has to be earned through a different pattern. This is where their private realization becomes almost sacred. Before asking you for forever, they must give you something you can actually stand on today. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Today. And what could that be? A promise? Close, but promises without evidence are fragile. A confession? Important, but confession alone cannot sustain a future. An apology? Perhaps necessary, but an apology describes what happened behind you. The missing piece must also shape what happens ahead. The answer lives somewhere deeper. Your soulmate needs to offer emotional safety through consistency. Not perfection. Not constant availability. Not impossible certainty about every future circumstance. Consistency means that their words and actions begin telling the same story. It means you no longer have to guess whether affection disappeared simply because a difficult conversation arrived. It means they learn to communicate rather than punish with silence. It means both of you can speak honestly without turning vulnerability into a weapon. It means the future is not built upon endless reassurance but upon patterns that naturally create reassurance. This is the important thing that comes first. Trust must become real enough for the future to have somewhere to stand. But even that is not the entire revelation. Because your soulmate has realized something about trust that they never understood before. Trust is not only about whether you believe them. It is also about whether they trust themselves. Do they trust themselves to remain present when fear appears? Do they trust themselves not to sabotage something meaningful because it feels unfamiliar? Do they trust themselves to speak honestly instead of retreating? Do they trust themselves to choose what they truly want even if other people do not understand? Until now, they may have thought the problem was whether you would trust their love. Suddenly they see that the first battle is whether they can trust their own capacity to live that love courageously. That realization has awakened something. There is a conversation forming inside them. A conversation they have rehearsed in fragments. Sometimes they imagine beginning with an apology. Other times they imagine simply telling you the truth without decoration. They have thought about explaining why they hesitated, but something tells them explanations will not be enough. They want you to understand their heart, yet they know they cannot use their past as an excuse for every wound their hesitation created. So the words keep changing. But one sentence remains. One sentence keeps returning whenever they imagine standing before you. And strangely, it is not, "I love you." It is something more vulnerable. Something that reveals what they are finally prepared to do differently. Before I tell you what that sentence is, there is another piece you need to see, because without it the words could sound simpler than they truly are. Your soulmate has recently begun imagining what happens after the confession. This matters. In the past, their imagination may have stopped at reunion, the embrace, the relief, the emotional release. Now they imagine the morning afterward. They imagine the responsibility of maintaining what was restored. They imagine having to prove through time that the change was real. And rather than frightening them away, this responsibility has begun giving their feelings direction. They do not merely want you back inside their emotional world. They want to learn how to keep you there without making you constantly wonder whether the door will close again. That is growth. But growth is rarely completed in a single realization, and your soulmate still has one final internal barrier to confront. It is the barrier that has quietly influenced nearly every decision they have made about you. It is connected to why they waited, why they questioned something that felt undeniable, and why they sometimes appeared distant precisely when their feelings were becoming strongest. There is a belief buried inside them. A belief about themselves. And until that belief changes, every promise about the future remains vulnerable. They have secretly wondered whether they are capable of receiving the kind of love they see in you. That may sound strange. People often assume everyone naturally welcomes love when it arrives, but deep love can expose every place where someone feels unworthy, unprepared, or afraid. Your presence has not merely awakened desire in them. It has confronted them with the possibility of being fully known. And being fully known means the masks eventually have to come down. They cannot hide behind confidence forever. They cannot pretend nothing hurts them. They cannot always be the one who needs nobody. A future with you would require them to let you see the parts they normally protect. And that is why the important thing comes first. Before forever, there must be truth. Before promises, there must be trust. Before building a shared life, there must be enough emotional courage to stop hiding from the very connection both hearts are trying to create. Your soulmate is standing closer to that courage than they have ever stood before. They have begun understanding that vulnerability is not surrendering power to another person. It is choosing authenticity even when there are no guarantees. And for the first time, they are considering doing something they previously avoided, speaking without knowing exactly how you will respond. That is the risk they know they must take. Because your heart deserves a choice, too. This may be the most important shift of all. They once focused primarily on whether they were ready. Now they realize you must also be allowed to decide whether what they offer is enough. They cannot simply appear and assume the story resumes wherever they left it. They must listen to what the journey has done to you. They must allow you to have boundaries. They must respect your questions. They must understand that your love does not erase your need for clarity. And somehow, instead of making them retreat, this realization has made them more certain. Because they no longer want control. They want connection. They no longer want you waiting in uncertainty. They want the chance to meet you in honesty. And the future they imagine has changed because of that. They see two people choosing each other freely rather than desperately. Two people who can be close without losing themselves. Two people who can disagree without threatening the entire bond. Two people who understand that love is not proven through emotional chaos but through the willingness to return to understanding again and again. They see peace. And perhaps that is what surprises them most. For so long, they may have associated powerful love with intensity, uncertainty, longing, and dramatic emotional highs and lows. But when they imagine the healthiest future with you now, it feels quieter, warmer, safer. There is laughter there. There is attraction there. There is depth there. But there is also rest. Your soulmate wants to become a place where your heart can rest. And they know they cannot offer that while their own heart remains at war with itself. So something is happening inside them now. A decision is forming, not merely the decision to choose you, but the decision to become honest about what choosing you requires. They know there are conversations they can no longer avoid. They know there are patterns they must stop carrying. They know that if they approach you, they must come without games, without vague promises, and without expecting you to decode what they are too afraid to say. The future is calling them toward maturity. And your presence is not forcing that transformation. It is revealing why the transformation matters. But remember this carefully, you are not responsible for completing it for them. Your role is not to stand outside their emotional door knocking until they become brave enough to open it. Your role is to remain faithful to the kind of love you know you deserve, mutual, honest, peaceful, passionate, respectful, and clear. If they step forward, they must step forward because they have chosen courage, not because you carried them there. And somewhere deep inside, they know this. That is why the sentence they keep rehearsing matters so much. They have imagined looking directly at you, without distraction, without hiding behind humor or casual words. Their heart races in the imagined moment because they know once they say it, there will be no returning to the comfortable uncertainty that protected them before. They will have revealed not only what they feel, but what they intend. The sentence begins simply. I don't want you to keep guessing anymore. But there is more. Much more. Because after those words comes the confession that explains the silence, the hesitation, and the future they have secretly been imagining. It also reveals the one change they know must happen before they can ask you to walk beside them permanently. And this is where something unexpected enters the story. Your soulmate recently recognized that there is one conversation they need to have before the conversation with you. One unfinished truth. One thing they have been carrying quietly. Something that has influenced the distance between you more than you ever realized. They know they cannot step into a new chapter while pretending this unfinished matter does not exist. They must face it. Not because it is stronger than your connection, but because hidden things have a way of following people into places where they do not belong. And your soulmate does not want that shadow entering the future they imagine with you. They have finally decided that if they are going to come toward you, they want to come with clean intentions. They want to stop allowing yesterday to negotiate tomorrow. They want to stop letting fear speak louder than truth. Most of all, they want to know that when they finally say, I choose this, they are not secretly holding on to an escape route. Something has to close. Something has to be spoken. And something has to be released. Your soulmate knows exactly what it is. They have known longer than they admitted. But what they are about to do concerning that unfinished truth may change the entire direction of this story. Because the moment they finally confront it, they will discover something they never expected, something about you, something about themselves, and something about why this connection kept returning to their heart even when they tried to walk away. And when they discover it, the sentence they have been rehearsing for you will no longer begin with, "I don't want you to keep guessing anymore." It will begin with words far more powerful. Words they have never had the courage to say to you before. But before those words can leave their lips, they must face the person, memory, or truth standing between who they used to be and who they are finally choosing to become. And what happens in that moment is the part you have not heard yet.